Almost there. Give it just a minute past the notification you see. Okay, we are live. Take it away.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting for Thursday, April 13th, 2023. We will jump right into our roll call. So I am the chair, Dylan McDowell. Keith Norris, our vice chair, is not here tonight. Alan Alexander.
Here.
All right, great. We're still seeing double of you, Alan, but I'm glad you're on at least video on one. Woody Dukes.
Here.
Rick Hartwig.
Here.
Al Holland.
I'm here.
Joan Lloyd is absent. Debbie Miller.
Here.
And Dave Friedenmaker is not able to join us tonight. Well, welcome everyone. I'm sorry I missed you all last month, but reading through the minutes, it looks like a really productive and full meeting, and we have a lot of agenda items tonight. So are there any comments or anything folks would like to share as we jump right into our minutes? All right. So we will have two sets of minutes to approve. We have February and March. So I'm assuming there may have been just a small mishap with last month. So did everyone get a chance to review February's as well as March? And if so, is there a motion to adopt the minutes or any changes?
I would move to adopt both. Do we need to do this individually or can we do this as one?
I think we can collectively do it. I'm all right with that.
Okay, I move to adopt these minutes.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, let's do a voice vote. Approval of the minutes. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Okay, the minutes are approved. We'll move into our public comment. I know we had written comments submitted by Ted Alberon, and I think, Ted, you were hoping to give us some verbal comment as well. So I believe as Rob and Nancy shared, you have 3 minutes, and if you could identify yourself and your peers, colleagues with you as well, that would be great. And we're excited to hear from you.
Perfect, thank you. Just want to start off with a good evening to members of the Salem Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. For the record, my name is Ted Alberon. I'll be presenting along with Marcy Weiss and Emily Embleton, just regarding our research on our academic capstone at Salem University. I'm going to start us off just discussing why access to parks is so important. There's currently inequitable access to park space in Salem. The more urbanized sections of the city are currently with little to no access to local parks. Optimal access to parks is defined as being within a 10-minute walk of parks, barring natural barriers that someone cannot be reasonably expected to cross. These are also areas with higher POC populations as well as a lower income populations. We've included relevant maps on this data based upon information provided by the Trust for Public Land in our written testimony. The current distribution of park space has resulted in many inequities, specifically in the benefits that come with park space, such as improvements in physical health, mental health, respiratory health, cardiovascular health, as well as decreased stress levels and the ability to focus. Additionally, inequities in urban heat island impacts. Salem is rapidly warming, and there are several parts of the city that are warming up faster than other parts of the city, and partially due to this inequitable access. We found that access to parks is the most significant factor regarding the benefits of park space, not necessarily the size of the parks. And so smaller parks can provide most of these benefits at a lower cost. Marcy's gonna go.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about, like, we already have neighborhood parks. So if we have that, why would we need pocket parks? So we believe that encouraging the development of pocket parks in Salem will help combat several of the inequities that low income and minority communities face. A lot of the time, these communities don't have the capacity or funding for a neighborhood park, and pocket parks offer a more realistic and affordable solution, while also allowing residents to enjoy the same benefits they would get from a larger neighborhood park. Pocket parks are a subsection of neighborhood parks, and they have a lower acreage requirement, and therefore they serve a smaller area. They're not a replacement for neighborhood parks, though, but rather a viable option for areas with space necessary for neighborhood parks, or without the space necessary for a neighborhood park. And for the record, pocket park we're defining it as a park under 2 acres. Additionally, a pocket park can provide access to green space wherever that green space can fit, which makes it one of the most flexible and viable options for urban greening. And along with this flexibility, one of the defining features of a pocket park is its ability to cater to specific needs of a community due to its size and location. And this is good because it provides the opportunity for low income and minority communities to have a park that feels entirely like their own, and then also incentivizes them to care about the upkeep and maintenance themselves as the community. Also, pocket parks are easier to sustain because they take up less space and are easier to create and maintain than a larger neighborhood or city park would be. Additionally, with their small size, they also increase efficiency in the upkeep since they can take less time and money to upkeep and require less labor. Also, they're just as effective, as Ted mentioned, in mitigating the effects of urban heat access because it's access rather than like the size of a park that matters. And then lastly, Salem just doesn't have like the additional space to keep throwing in these larger neighborhood parks, especially if we're moving towards an urban densification. Then we really have to be deliberate about how space is used, and we have to make sure to include parks that are going to be reduced in scale, which is why a pocket park would be great.
Perfect. We are at 3, but I'll go over just a little bit more, but if you could keep it concise, that'd be wonderful.
Yes, just the final bit is our suggestions based on our research are primarily location and landscaping. We've been interviewing and working with Lynn from the Northeast Neighbors, as well as Southeast Salem Neighborhood Association. Those are both areas really in need of more green space, who are both ready and willing to engage with the city in the labor and maintenance to obtain the land as well as maintain the park. The region surrounding the fairgrounds is particularly where we're interested in, and hoping that you guys can help in getting the Oregon State Fair Council on board, because we know that they've been resistant to efforts as far as implementation of parks and unused parking space. And as far as landscaping goes, we really highly advocate for the use of native plants, or at least lawn alternatives such as moss, which also will help create a more cost-efficient park by reducing water and maintenance costs in the long run. Given Salem's climate, within 2 years of initial planting after soil restoration, we can decrease maintenance costs if native plants are used. And it can be up to 6 times less costly in the long run than grass lawns or typical urban greenery.
Thank you so much for that information. We can open it up to some questions from the board, and I think all of us might have at least some questions. But first, I just want to say thank you for your work on this. This is really important. Obviously, all of us are really passionate about seeing more of the parks in the community. And if you saw when you first logged on, my little kiddos were here a minute ago, and I'm very interested in making sure they have a lot of park access. Could you both just tell us, or I guess could the 3 of you just share, are you all, how far into the university are you? Are you going to be around next year when we really get into some of the park planning process as well?
Yeah, this is our senior capstone, so we're all in our last year at the university. We do all have plans to stay in the Salem area throughout the summer and most likely into next year, so we will be around for a lot of the planning.
That's wonderful to hear. And I think as Rob has probably shared with you before, we're going to be moving into the comprehensive park system plan here within the next year in Salem, which is really exciting. And one thing we as in SPRAB had a retreat last October. And one of the things we've been talking about is how can we be more proactive getting ready for the plan this year. So as the city right now goes through its transportation system plan, all of us trying to do a little bit more of this research and homework of what we can be preparing to think about as we go into this. So your timing is great. Really appreciate this research. And I'll open it up to I have some questions too, but I want to share it with the board. So I saw Al Holland and then Rick Hartwig's hand went up as well. So Al?
Just very briefly, thank you very much, folks. You've done well. You contributed a lot to the community by doing what you're doing. This research helps. It's not contrary to our sentiments. In fact, these very inequities of access and distribution of available resources for community use for the benefit and the purposes that you iterate in your sentiments are shared. We've known this. It's not like this is a surprise. And it's frustrating as all get out because things do not move fast. But you have provided fuel to endorse the sentiments of myself and others on SPRAB here. And we've been aware of these things, and your research provides us corroboration and substance for justifying where we would like to push. But it's also provided us a tool. I hadn't thought about this pocket park business. I've just been thinking about neighborhood parks and stuff, but this is wonderful. And it expands the possibilities. So I think that this is really good, and I don't want you to let it go. And I hope that we can't let it go as a group. So thank you again. And I'll be receptive to hearing more and how we can pursue this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Rick?
Yeah, Alan said a lot of what I wanted to say. We have a lot of, that Al and I did a tour of all the parks in the city, and we noticed where the underserved areas were. And a lot of them are in a lot of the older parts of the city. And, that those neighborhoods were established long time before anybody had ever envisioned urban planning. And so, yeah, I mean, gosh, find a vacant lot and turn it into an area that the people on that street or the small area can claim ownership of. And that's wonderful. I could not support this anymore. I am just thrilled, and I am excited that anytime that young people, I'm a recovering teacher, and so anytime that young people can do something like this, I get very excited. So kudos to you, and let's keep going. And I support this with everything. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have just a quick question for you all. I guess two quick questions. One, I guess as part of this, I would invite you all as you finish your capstone, if there's a more, I don't know how you all present your capstone, but if there's more information you'd like to pass along, we'd definitely be receptive to receiving that. Have you been thinking about how some of this intersects with the federal funding opportunities that are really present right now? So everything from the increase in Land Water Conservation Fund to the IRA funding, there's a lot of funding coming. There was still some ARPA funds left over in certain states. And so as those trickle down to different communities, there's been some creative uses across the country to try and figure out how you can really combat some of the inequities, especially with, you may be familiar with like the Justice 40 initiative federally of trying to put 40% of funding into underserved communities. And I'd love to know if you all have thought about any kind of overlays that we could help the city maybe identify to thinking about funding that could help develop these parks.
Yeah, funding's definitely been something that's been on our radar a lot, especially after discussions with Rob, just about cost of parks, as well as the limited funding that the city of Salem has to add on to parks. We haven't been able to find, we haven't isolated a specific source of funding, so I don't think we have a clear answer to your question just yet, but that is something that we'll be looking into more going forward.
And I think that we do still have a bit more time before the research is over, and I really appreciate you bringing that to attention. And I think there's a lot we could do to explore those possibilities in terms of federal funding before our final presentation. We've been looking really state and city based so far in terms of our funding and stuff like that.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think in general that, the federal funds do come down to the state. So you're looking at the right place. But I work in environmental policy in my day job, and just knowing that there's a lot of that overlap right now, even with the America the Beautiful 30 by 30 initiative, thinking about urban green spaces as an opportunity. So I'm always really interested about where can we find that nexus of federal funds and interest with some of this, the park work. And it seems like the three of you might be really well suited to help the city pinpoint some of those opportunities. And then the last thing I would just ask, I see that there was a link in the testimony to, I believe it was Dallas, just other examples of really successful parks that we can be thinking about or looking at for across the country are always really helpful, especially for communities similar in at least size to Salem. So I don't know if there's any you'd like to point out now, or if that's something you could share with us as part of your final project.
We have a few other examples of that. Yeah, and this is kind of specific ones. We've also found really good examples in places like Seattle, which isn't as relevant to a city like Salem, but it is similar environmentally, as well as the city of Bend, Oregon, has very successful pocket parks.
And my personal favorite, which is comparable in city size, but it's opposite end of the country, in New Jersey, the Fairmont Triangle Park. What they created a pocket park in Intersection Island, by which solved the issue of all three of the areas in which the intersection connected didn't have access to green space. And so they pedestrianized the walkways and turned that island into a small pocket park, which was just such an incredibly creative idea. And I think looking at projects like that help us expand the possibilities of what we think could happen with adding greenery in these urban areas. And that's the Fairmont Triangle Park, if anyone is
perfect.
That.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, Ted, Emily, Marcy, thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing more. Please feel free to pass it along to Nancy, Rob, or myself, and we'll make sure it gets out to the board.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, I know we had a few other members of the public. Did anyone else want to, was anyone else looking to provide testimony on items not currently on the agenda? Or, okay. Hearing none. Mickey, we will go over to you now for city council updates.
Yay, thank you, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Chair McDowell and members of SCRAB. It's wonderful to be here. I'm Mickey Varney, Salem City Councilor for Ward 8. We're always busy with council, so and I try to pick out a few things that will be of interest to SCRAB to share with you. The first thing I wanted to mention was at the March 27th City Council meeting, we approved a grant application from Pete from Portland General Electric to purchase an electric powered mini street sweeper. And the importance of this is as we look forward to our transportation plan and we're looking at more putting in protected buffered bike lanes. One of the problems we have is our current street sweepers will not fit in the narrower areas. So we're pretty excited about this grant opportunity because it would be wonderful to have an electric sweeper for one, and number two, to have one that would fit in those narrow spaces. So that's one thing. At the April 5th meeting, which was a work session, it was a continuance of a work session that we started back on February 21st, and it's to consider revenue options for the city. The reason that we need to do this, I can go into a lot more detail and answer a lot of questions, but I don't want to take up a lot of time tonight unless you have specific areas. But basically the costs for city services have outpaced our revenues, and our general fund isn't going to be covering our current services. In fact, will be $17 million behind for fiscal year 2025, which basically starts in July of 2024. And that would be a continuance of our continuing services, which includes a lot of the services we've implemented to address homelessness here in the city. So I can go into more detail. The two options that we're looking at are a city operations fee increase of, it would be a $5.50 increase for the residential account, and then other increases for the other accounts. And that would pay for one of the things of interest that it would pay more for the city operations, security, code enforcement, the park rangers, and our SOS team and support. Our SOS team is our, I'm trying to remember exactly what the acronym is. The one that goes out and helps clean up some of the trash and debris, etc. This would also increase the number of park rangers we have, add a couple more, as well as increasing security for our parking structures, code enforcement. There are a couple other things. So that would be the operations fee. The other thing we're looking at is an employee paid and self-employment payroll tax. These are very common in cities that are either capitals or have public universities, and that's because there is a loss of revenue when you don't have that property tax. Eugene, Canby, and Sandy all have payroll taxes. And this tax can be implemented by the city council by ordinance, or it can be referred to voters. If it were referred to voters, it would be in the November 2023 election, which would be able to collect revenue in April of 2025. With the payroll tax, we're looking at 3 different levels. And if you have questions about what's covered under each of the levels, I can talk about that, but basically the basic level would cover basic services. Boy, oh boy. One of the things I wanted to mention was that as a result of the city survey that goes out to residents every year, the two top priorities are addressing crime and addressing homelessness. So with this payroll tax at the first level, which is a 0.49%, what it does, as well as covering some of our other services, but it would give us the community policing model. It would expand the police and homeless outreach team, which is the homeless outreach team that our police department provides in coordination with Marion County. It would increase that to 7 days a week. It would give us partial funding for our navigation center, which is opening, well, the grand opening this month, which is providing services to our homeless. And other than that, it would cover existing services. And then with an increase in going up to the next level, instead, maybe looking at the 0.56% payroll tax, the things we could add we could fully fund the navigation center, and we could fund one of the shelter sites, the micro shelter sites that's on board, or that we have. We currently have 3. We're going to run out of funding for those unless we do something. And then the other tier that we're looking at for payroll tax is a 0.661, and it would do the navigation center, all 3 of our micro shelter sites, continue our towing program, and implement a mobile crisis response unit. So those are all things I know are of interest to the community, but we need to have some tough discussions because it's going to hurt a lot of people. I really struggled at the April 5th meeting because it really hurts, but we have to do something. And there are going to be a lot of discussions coming up in regards to what we're going to do moving forward. So that was a big part. That was April 5th. April 10th, which was just Monday, we removed the minimum parking requirement citywide. This was in response to a state mandated parking reform, and we already had eliminated minimums downtown and in our core transit areas. And what we did Monday night was expand it citywide. And then the other thing on Monday, it was in your packet, in tonight's packet too, was we approved the submission of the grant to the Willamette Wildlife Mitigation Program for that 400-acre, almost 400-acre property just north of Wallace Marine Park. So those are my council updates. The last thing I wanted to say before I open up to questions or whatever is an organization I belong to, the American Association of University Women. They are having a tree planting event at Stevens Yoshikai School Park in recognition of Earth Day. It's going to be on April 21st from 9 to 2 p.m. They're going to provide refreshments. We're planting about 30 to 32 trees. The money for the trees came from part of a trust from an American Association and University Women member, as well as other members that contributed to the fundraising. In the past, I'm an AAUW member, and I was president of this organization for 3 terms earlier. And we would discuss ways that we could increase tree canopy, address climate change, and what we could do. The association its main focus is on education for women and girls. So anything that's associated with a school or education those are the types of programs that we support. And one of the reasons we're excited about this is it's adjacent to the school, and we may even have some students coming out and helping us. And that to me is really crucially important, because in the past on SPRAB, we've talked about implementing programs where we can get more educational materials into schools for students in regards to trees. So I know I went over a whole bunch of stuff there,
Well, thank you, Mickey. I really appreciate that, especially some of the things that are maybe they feel a little more technical with some of the budget stuff, but it's so important for us to know and be aware of, especially, as we talk about where we are people interacting in the community and we're people that are, we can talk about parks, but all that's impacting parks, as you talked about, park rangers are part of that. The street sweepers, the homelessness issues, all that intersects. So really appreciate having a more holistic view, and but just thank you for being here every time.
Well, thank you.
Does anyone have questions for Mickey? Yeah, Debbie.
Yeah, I just want to know if there's like a minimum income for the payroll tax so that it doesn't hurt people with very low incomes.
Good question. It will be above the minimum wage is when it kicks in, so it won't affect people that are working at minimum wage. At the meeting on the 5th, I said, we really need to make this at least $15, if not $18 an hour for that. So we're in the middle of discussions because yes, it really impacts, it impacts everyone. What was I gonna say? In Salem, the median household income is $62,000. And so looking at the three percentages we're looking at, that would be a range of $304 to $410 a year for someone in that medium range. So yes, it's a heck of an impact, and that really concerns me. But what concerns me even more is what if we don't do something, the services we're going to lose, everything from shutting down fire stations to not having coverage for our parks, for just so many things. Because as we've grown, we've implemented things, and well, even our infrastructure bond, we can build things and do things, but we need to have funds to be able to operate them.
Thank you. It's really helpful. Anyone else have questions or comments for Mickey? Al.
Thank you, Mickey, for coming. I wanted to at some time learn more about the net costs associated with the net impact on the budget associated with discussions about airport stuff. But that's another question. What I really want to know is the date for that Yoshikai AEW tree planting the 21st on Friday, or is it on Saturday the 22nd?
It is on Friday, the 21st.
Friday.
We moved it because the city already had a number of planting events going on the 22nd. So we decided to move it to the 21st. Plus, we're trying to get some students out there if we can.
Yeah. Okay. As a former middle school teacher, I might hang out there for a while. We'll see.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll watch. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mickey. Really appreciate it. And as always, you're welcome to stick around for the rest of the meeting, but we also know you have a lot of different events going on.
I will be just hanging out in the background in case a question comes up or anything. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we have 5 items under our board items and presentations tonight. So first up is Dr. Robert Chandler with updates to Chapter 51 and Chapter 86. Robert, thanks for being back.
My pleasure to be here. I am going to try to share my screen. If I find it. There should be a presentation up. How'd I do?
You did great. It looks good.
All right. Always tone a surprise. So I have on my whiteboard kind of to my right, I'm in the middle of like 7 different code revisions. And it occurred to me that it's been a while since I've talked to Sprab on what's going on, even in the largest picture. And there are 2 codes that I wanted to bring to your attention, again, very high level. I will, Dylan, I'm operating off of one screen. So if somebody has a hand up, I won't see it until I end up the presentation. So just give me a shout.
Will do.
So we're working on 2 codes, Salem Revised Code Chapter 54, titled Event Sound Permits, and Salem Revised Code Chapter 86, Trees on City-Owned Property. And I am Robert Chandler. I am the Assistant Director of Public Works here. Yet again, a pleasure to be back with you all to talk about it. We have talked off and on for some time, even up to pre-COVID, about trees on city-owned property. I'll talk a little bit about what's going on with that, but this might be the first time about these event sound permits. So the code was originally created out of nothing in 2011. The background is that the only other ordinance that was being applied was the noise ordinance. And for somebody who wanted to do an event that had music, they had to get council approval, which turned out to be kind of either ponderous or ignored. So we created this code, chapter 51, that allowed for permits for activities, both activities in parks and noise generating activities, maintenance, outdoor contract work. That's kind of how it is. So an event or an activity, get a permit. It's worked reasonably well, but it's time to get some upgrades, some updates based on some experience and lessons learned. Big picture, we're trying to simplify the process for an event that's being conducted in a city park. And I'll tell you how we're going to do that on the next slide. We're also clarifying, codifying, or in some cases, relocating within the code language, the authorities of the city health officers, and then revising, enhancing how we enforce issues related to our sound code. So first off, we clarify what the sound levels are, when they're required, and it's kind of a matrix of where the sound is being generated and where the sound is being received. I haven't got the matrix in front of me, but if it's we're updating some areas so that a sound sensitive area can now get a permit. We found out that churches are actually doing sound permits. And we've got the times for when they're daytime, nighttime sound generation, tying that to work with events and the sound measurements, and we codified how we actually have been measuring sound. So it's now in code. One of the big things is to simplify getting a sound permit for parks, events in city parks. We did that by dividing what is currently Class B permit, and that's for an event greater than 1 day. So that a Class B1 is an event in a city park for 1 day or more, and a Class B2 is an event not in a city park. And the reason we did that is that if the event is in a city park, the person generating the sound does not have to do outreach and notice, provide public notice. It's a lot of work. In some cases, the work was not done to generate public notice, donut hangers, bulletin boards, everything. If you're going to do something in a park, we've eliminated the requirement to give notice for an event in a city park. You're still required to give notice if it's greater than 24 hours and it's not in a city park. So we're just modifying those to align with the current practice. I talked to our health officer here, and in the years he's been managing our event sound permits, nobody has ever submitted a response based on a notice for an event in a city park. So it was why make people do this if it doesn't really have an impact. A slight modification for the current code says you have to notify neighborhood associations if they might be able to hear the sound. I live in South Salem. I've heard sounds in the park downtown. We received complaints from West Salem, so it just didn't make sense. So if the event sound event is located within, you notify the neighborhood association that is where the location is. We clarified and codified the authorities of the health officer, who has the authority to adjust levels and times based on the event if necessary sound levels. For short-term events, the health officer can have the authority to reduce the application period, which can be as much as, I want to say 45 days. And some people have come to us last minute and it wasn't a problem, except that the code said one thing. So our health officer, under circumstances, and we define the criteria, can adjust those application periods. We also added provision that if the person has been associated with violating an event sound permit within the last 2 years, we can deny their permit application. Last thing we did with the event sound permits was aligned the civil penalties with Salem Revised Code Chapter 20J, which the title there is Administrative Rulemaking and Contested Case Procedures, but that has our policy for issuing notices of violation. So those are the big picture things that we're doing for the event sound permits, simplifying the application process, clarifying current conduct, and making events in parks easier to get permits. Tell you what, Dylan, let me just pass through or press on with the other code, and I'll get rid of the screen and see what questions we have. Does that work for you?
I think so. Yeah, we can try
All
that.
right. Beautiful. So trees on city-owned property. This has been going on for a while for a lot of reasons. And basically, let me see what I got. So the background I wrote last revised in 2015. 2015, we was a total replacement of the existing code. And over the years, we've learned some things that work, some things that don't work, some things that need to be clarified. So this is incorporating all those lessons learned, both in the code and the associated administrative rule. The big change that I want you to be aware of is currently, so the land use process is if somebody, I'll give you an example, somebody wants to create a subdivision, they have to follow the Uniform Development Code with a host of different permits and applications and reviews and compliance with city codes. And when they go through all of that, they end up with a notice of approval that they now are approved to do their subdivision. Then when they get ready to do the subdivision, if their subdivision impacts street trees, for example, they have to go through a separate process currently managed through Salem Revised Code Chapter 86. And that can change the process. It can, at that point, objections can arise, things can go wrong, and now the developer has to adjust plans, sometimes significantly, in order to address those. There are pros and cons on where you have the city-owned property trees affiliated with development on how you do that. The advantage of doing it as we currently do is that it can be a number of years between the time the land use approval occurs and the actual project begins. And when the actual project begins, people who are involved earlier might have forgotten, or people who moved into the area now are aware of a tree being removed. The disadvantage is that the development has gone through a long gauntlet of approvals, and now things can change, and it's an issue of development and costs and actually availability of housing. So the idea is either way, there's notification, opportunities for approvals or objections, and opportunities for appeal. We're proposing to put the tree removals for city-owned trees in conjunction with the land use process, incorporate things into the Uniform Development Code that include notification from SPRAB. SPRAB, the neighborhoods and neighborhood associations get word that this is a proposed project, these are trees proposed to remove. At that time, you have the opportunity to provide input. Once it's approved, then the public process is closed. We can talk more about that after I finish here. We clarified the enforcement protocols and penalties. I'll talk about that. Long overdue revising, there's an appendix on approved and prohibited trees, and associated with this are some changes to the two different administrative rules. So here's talking about the tree removal process. In the tree removals approved in the land use process, everybody gets notified. There's appeal process to the planning commission or the hearings officer, city council. That is the opportunity to do integrated street trees and the development together, as opposed to parsed out over what could be several years. We're clarifying in the code, was actually currently in the code, if you violate the tree code, there are actually 3 different things you have to pay. The first is a civil penalty, and that's in a function of the type of tree that has been lost and the nature of how it was violated. There's an enforcement matrix there. You have to pay the appraised value of the tree, is a determination by the urban forester. There's actually a standard methodology that takes into account type of tree, health of tree, diameter of tree, the tree's value, And then the cost of restoration, the cost to restore that property to the tree in that area to what it was. The current code requires the person who violated the permit to do that. We discovered that's a bad idea. So we tell the third cost for violation is this is what's going to cost us to replant that tree, restore the area. We'll do it. Trust us. Give us the money. There are 2 administrative rules.
Robert, if I could just clarify one point
Yep.
on there, I just want to make
Go
sure. Are
ahead,
you
go ahead.
saying that all 3 of that a penalty you would be penalized with all 3 of those, or is it one of the 3 depending?
All 3. They are added together.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
No, fair enough. The civil penalty can be up to $2,000 per violation. The appraised value, of course, varies by the tree. We've had some trees, I want to say $5,000 or $6,000, maybe more. And the cost of restoration is the cost of material and services for our crews to go out and restore it.
Wonderful, thank you.
So there's an administrative rule that is directly affiliated with Chapter 86. We've incorporated the protocols and the contents for a notice of violation to make sure it's complete. We have by rule how you appraise the value of the tree. We clarify, and so there's a clear method for determining the restoration costs. And like I said, our current list of what is recommended and prohibited trees is dated, and we've incorporated that. The other thing on the civil penalty, currently, the civil penalty is silent on what type of tree was lost. We have classified the trees in the code, in our proposed code, to a class 1 or a class 2 tree, or actually class 3, which means it's not a class 1 or class 2 tree. And that is how you then define what is a major or moderate violation. For that to make sense, I added this slide, which tells you what the tree is like. Class 1 heritage, rare, threatened, or endangered, white oak certainly, or a tree with a 20 inches or greater diameter at breast height, about 4 feet above the ground. And a class 2 tree is not a class 1, but it's healthy, stable, 6 inches or more at diameter at breast height, and has a lifespan of 5 or more years. So that's a class 1 and a class 2 tree. If somebody violates the code and there's a tree lost, our enforcement officer does a 2-step process. And this is in the administrative rule on enforcement of public work regulations. The first is a matrix, and we do this for all different violations, a spill, actually sound code. Key thing on the criterion, was it within person's control? Did they fail to get permits or approvals? Was it willful or knowing violation? How will the person respond once notified of the violation? And has this been doing more than once? The violator, more is it repeat? We have, and there's more information in the administrative rule of how to do this. You score the points, and then you go in the matrix, and that's where the classification fits in. Based on the number of points, again, from this matrix. And it doesn't take, if you're a repeat offender who snubbed your nose at city codes, didn't get a permit, and you're not cooperative, you're at 10 or more points right away. And so then the question is, was it a minor, moderate, or major? If it's a class 1 tree, it's major. If it's class 2, it's moderate, and the difference doubles the penalty. So that's how we've incorporated the nature of the tree that is lost with the size of the penalty. So if you go out and cut down a tree of, even if you're not sure what it is, but it's 20 inches or more, you should know that's a tree that you shouldn't be cutting down without a permit or permission. That's a major violation. Certainly we want to protect our Oregon white oaks some more. So that's, again, big picture, changes 86, bring it up to speed, update some issues, and among other things, clarify, codify, and be provide a more robust penalty if you violate our code. That's it. I'm dealing with the internal review, mostly working with our city attorney's office to make sure that the engineer, that's me, doesn't say anything that doesn't fit legal word. We're talking about neighborhood associations for briefings. My target is June or July to city council. SPRAB will certainly be notified of it once we polish up the codes and the administrative rules and the staff reports. And I think that's it. All right.
Thank you, Robert. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for the data dump opportunity and the long run on sentences.
No, this is really helpful. I guess a simple question to start is, when the code is confirmed by the lawyer, are you going to send us the actual code to review in addition to the high level points that we could be looking at that? I know some of us on the board have had a little more experience than others looking at the code.
I might. What I need to do, I wasn't able to catch our assigned assistant city attorney. We don't always give codes to different boards and commissions. I want to make sure I'm within our current protocols before I do that. I think I can, but I want to verify before I do. If I can, you certainly can. I will.
I would encourage it, and especially given it's so pertinent, and in this case, actually removing some authority from SPRAB. It seems that for us to accurately and adequately comment on the code itself, I would appreciate if there's an opportunity to see that. I have a couple comments specifically on. I just want to. I'll raise just. Would you prefer if we start on sound and kind of get all of our comments out on sound and then move to trees, or what would be your preference?
I'm flexible.
Okay. Al, I see your hand up, but I just want to ask two real quick. First off, is Alan Alexander and I were part of the park usage and planning subcommittee that we did, Robert, that you helped us lead. And I was looking back at that just now, and there was two specific requests that we had put in that for folks that are newer to the board. Yep. Did I have a glitch there? I think I'm back.
You froze briefly, Alan.
Sorry. For those that are newer to the board, we went through and put out a whole set of recommendations to the city regarding park usage and permitting. And in those, as hopefully you've had a chance to revisit those, Robert, but one of those we talked about sound permits was maximum decibel allowed. The actual permit itself, that there was some confusion. We noticed that it didn't have information like permissible hours, how that's determined, allowable decibel levels, some information that would be good for folks when they're completing that to fill out. And then how that enforcement was done. None of that was on the permit itself. So I think if that's part of this process or it could be reviewed, that would be wonderful.
It is. We establish a maximum decibel level. We establish the hours, and when it be applied, the health officer can adjust those levels, typically downward, and the hours. So it's much more clear in the code.
That's great. And then what about the public aspect? Because there's the code aspect, which I'm glad to hear. And then we also talked in the recommendations here about making sure the public was aware, because one of the things I remember distinctly is that if you're just a member of the public and you go get a permit and it doesn't even have the permissible hours, it's, I think, a tall order to expect them to actually go through the code itself. And so making sure some of those key information points are translated to the public side would be good.
We will. I think we'll make sure we have to update the application form. And that would have the hours. I think the current form says the hours that you're allowed to do that. I'm looking at.
Does it now? Okay. This is I'm looking at the day here, September 9th, 2021. So it's been a little while, but it's glad to hear that. And then just to clarify in the notification requirements, one of our recommendations that we talked through at that point was considering the city taking on the responsibility to notify people, or seeing if there was a feasible way to do that. In terms of, I think you said it was B1 would be if it's in a park, and so that's when you would have the requirement. Is that something you looked into?
We looked into that, and we really don't have, I mean, it's a resource intensive thing. And after that work, some queries with our experiences is that when we have and so the sound code looks at both activities, jackhammering and somebody's sidewalk, and events in parks. So we just looked at the park side of it. Mm-hmm. And with at least 4 years of experience, we've done various levels of notification and gotten no feedback from neighbors saying, don't do this in a park, or this is a problem for the park. So, okay. So we don't do notification now, and we considered it, but it doesn't make sense to expend resources for something that historically has not provided any background.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Al Holland, I see your hand is up.
Just a very small question. I wanted to be sure that this was relevant only to trees on city property. People that are cutting trees on private property, what kind of restrictions would apply to such cutting?
That's an excellent question, and I don't know the answer that I give you with any confidence. I don't know. I am familiar with trees in development projects. It's administered by my next door neighbor department for projects on development. But I think your question is, if somebody has a tree on their private property, they want to cut it down, what are the requirements? I don't know. I'm afraid to say and be wrong. We can get back to you on that.
I would love to hear a response to that or be directed someplace that could help.
I'm sure there are requirements. I don't know them off the top of my head.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Just the same. All right.
Al, that's a really good question. And it's just as we think about all of us going out into the community with neighborhood presentations and other materials, it's probably good for us all to have at least know where to point people for that information. So Robert, if you could help us find that, and then I believe Mylan is not able to join us tonight. He had a conflict, but I'm sure he could help guide us as well. So between the two of you, if any information could be shared out through via Rob and Nancy, that would be wonderful.
Oh, absolutely. It's not, you're right. It's a simple question. I don't know the answer for sure.
Other questions for Robert? Woody?
Hi, yeah. Hi, Robert.
Hey,
I noticed, well, you said something about SPRAB when appeals for tree removals come to SPRAB. Is that in the land use process?
yes.
Okay. Now, then another slide, you said where appeals would come to the planning commission, you never get the other than the city council and the other one, the third. Anyway, what are the different circumstances between this and that?
That's a good catch. I think I spoke through all of that. So I use the word appeal. The opportunity for input is during the land use process before the decision is made. And so SPRAB would receive notification of proposed removal of city-owned trees and have the opportunity to provide input on that. Once the land use decision has been made, it goes before, depending on the nature of it, the planning commission, or it can go to city council. And that's where you have the opportunity to say this is incorrect, or our input was not received or acted upon, and then city council can call it up for a public hearing, and council can make a decision. And if that, as I understand, if you're not happy with that, then you appeal to the hearings officer.
Then we as SPRAB appeals to it, or I'm just
Again?
trying to figure out where is SPRAB in this
So SPRAB,
in the appeals process.
so SPRAB would not be hearing the appeal of a land use action. You're still engaged on a proposed tree removal that is not part of a land use process. When somebody wants, a private property owner wants to cut down a tree that's a city-owned tree, or there's a project that removed trees and someone is appealing that, that would still go to SPRAB. Was that your question, Woody?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, we're really just pulling out the land use process. The subdivision is a good example, where somebody wants to, where the subdivision involves a host of different things: roadways, sidewalks, street improvements, as well as work inside the subdivision itself. That's where SPRAB will be notified of the impacts to street trees, city-owned trees, and have the opportunity to provide input to the decision and to appeal that decision depending on where it goes, if dissatisfied. Still, if somebody wants to remove a tree as part of their personal project, or, a city-owned tree, a commercial business or whatever wants to remove it, they still have to get a permit through SRC 86 through the director. And SPRAB gets notified of that, and the director can refer the issue to SPRAB.
So you're saying that's the only situation that SPRAB would be involved in a hearing for a tree removal?
You would be involved as a stakeholder in the subdivision process, in the land use process. You would still be involved in hearing an appeal of a director issued permit for something unrelated to land use.
Okay.
Robert, to follow up on that, sorry, Woody, did you have another piece?
Go ahead. No.
Just to follow up on that, one thing we had talked about last time you were here was potentially granting SPRAB additional time of public comment. So I think one of the concerns is that for example, historically with city council, we used to be lumped into the 3 minutes of trying to give our annual report. And now we were able to have extra time. And in some of the hearings, I know neighborhood associations get a few more minutes than individuals, for example. And I feel like as a board and commission, especially if there's a reason that we'd be speaking there pertinent to trees, given that we're voicing the body of this body in particular, it'd be good to have some language in there to provide that.
Let me check into that. I've forgotten that, but I think that's written into the council rules, and I wouldn't. I'm checking. Is Mickey still here? We can check and see what it would take to change that.
Okay, well, it seems like, isn't that something you could put into it, or I guess maybe not, but I know it's feasible to change because it has been changed for the neighborhood associations. The other thing I'd like to put in there one of the reasons I'm curious about the direct language is not just SPRAB notification, but given that we are, as Woody has pointed out, this is kind of changing the process of where we're involved. Making sure that it is enough notice that we can have a meeting in between. And I think that given that we only meet once a month and due to public meeting laws, we don't have the ability to organize ourselves in any way very effectively in between meetings to try and make any comment or anything like that. That I think at least aiming for, and with the exception of extreme circumstances, having whatever, the extent of one SPRAB meeting or 30 days that passes that or something would be important, just to make sure we're still included in some form.
That's a good point. I'll check on that. I think it's already incorporated because neighborhood associations have a similar role and a similar meeting frequency. And they're notified for these as well. I'll check.
Okay. Any other questions for Robert? Robert, I would just say that, I know Woody was really active on the 86 rewrites originally, and we've had growing in. I know I've dug more into code than I ever expected after the PUP committee a couple of years ago. And so, when you think about the June, July, I believe you said timeline for council and going neighborhood associations prior to that, at the very least, sending the code when it becomes public to share with us to review prior to council. And if there's a reason we want to reach out to you or request another briefing, I'd appreciate that, just given that this does directly impact our purview in this case.
I appreciate that too, and your time. My experience is that the draft code now is a better product because of the time you guys have spent and invested in it much earlier too. So we will, I just need to check the process, make sure. That's all.
All right. Well, thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none. All right. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.
Okay. Next up, we have Mission Street Parks Conservancy update. I believe Maureen is going to be giving that for us tonight.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. So Maureen McGee, I'm a board member with the Mission Street Parks Conservancy. Thank you very much for having me here with you tonight. We submitted our quarterly report in writing. It should have been part, and I see that it was part of your materials. So I don't want to belabor that by really walking through it, but I will just take a quick minute to mention one activity of ours that did not make it into that quarterly report that you may have some interest in. And that is that on March 15th, we submitted a letter to Jennifer with the Public Works Department to recommend a significant number of trees within Bush's Pasture Park as heritage trees. Christine Shute, who is our board director, had learned that the city was reviving the heritage tree program at a SPRAB meeting where Don Gunther from the city parks had described it. And that inspired us to look into whether or not there were trees within the park that would be nominated. We worked with Elin Davis. I hope I'm not pronouncing his name incorrectly, who also reviewed the list that we submitted. And we also worked with some knowledgeable park lovers. We had a work group that included some of those park lovers, an arborist, a Bush House Museum representative, a Willamette professor, and some of their students. And so that letter nominated a number of trees within the park. So we are looking forward to seeing that process progress. I will have to say that I personally have not been involved in that process. And so I don't have like great details on you of like what the next steps are, but excited to see that move forward. Other than that, I think the only thing that I would highlight from our written report is just a pitch for our plant sale on April 28th and 29th. We have two major fundraisers each year. This spring plant sale is one of them, and the other one is in the summer in July that is done along with the art fair. So we're gearing up for that. And we're very, very excited to get people out for their spring plantings. One thing that's exciting this year is that for the first time in around 12 years, I believe, we'll be offering roses that we propagated from the Tartar Old Rose collection at Bush Park. So it's really exciting for us to be able to take rose bushes that have been propagated from the park and then sell them out into the community where people can have those same varieties growing at their own home. So I think in the interest of time, I'll kind of stop there, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Maureen. Appreciate that. Any questions?
I think it's worthy just to say thank you so much for what you're doing there. And I'll look forward to getting a couple roses for my front yard. I really am looking forward to that. Thanks so much. That's a great idea.
Wonderful. Yeah, I have a few rose bushes in my yard that I am looking to replace with some of these new propagations too. So
That's so
Great.
exciting. I plan to be out at the plant sale as well, and I hope everyone else here can join. Which, could you say the dates one more time, just so everyone has that down?
So it'll be April 28th and 29th. And it's at the bottom of the Soapbox Derby track, and you should have had a flyer in your materials.
There it is. Yes, perfect. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you all. Take care.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have the CIP discussion with Tammy Stars.
Let me unmute so you guys can hear me. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully it works. Can you guys see the presentation, or is it?
And it's not full screen yet, so we can still see all the menu options. There you go. Now it looks good.
Good. Again, my name is Tammy Stars, Program Manager in Public Works Engineering, and I'm going to give a high-level overview. I had talked to Rob, and he had talked to you guys, I think, at your last meeting and gave you a rundown on Parks CIP. My presentation is going to include parks in it, but it's also more of the whole capital improvement plan for fiscal years 24 through 28. And you can stop me at any time and let me know if you have questions, or I can take them at the end as well. So the objective of our 5-year capital improvement plan is to create a transparent CIP process, establish a risk-based priority list. We match the priority list to our limited resources in a thoughtful and responsible manner, and we establish an internal CIP review committee to oversee that process. And so I just wanted to kind of take you through our current process of what we do. We have CIP committee meetings that run typically May through January, and those are a combination of engineering staff, planning staff, and operations staff from all the different sections, obviously in public works, as well as urban development. And then I get projects from IT and facilities. Those projects we don't meet as a committee, but definitely for water, sewer, storm, parks, transportation, and urban development, we do have our committee meetings. We add new issues, and those are projects that come in from either planning, operations, or engineering staff, or from community members of items that are out, infrastructure that needs to be fixed, or new ideas for improvements within the city. The committees review those current issues. We look at the master plan updates and the projects that come from those master plan updates. We review studies and evaluations on projects. Each of the committees have scores, 4 to 5 scorers. The new projects that come in each year, the new issues that come in, we score those. And urban development projects at this time aren't scored. We don't score IT projects or facilities projects. but the utility projects, parks, transportation, those are scored. Funding, just some of our funding sources include bonds, development districts, gas tax. Grants could be state grants, parks grants, federal grants, system development charges, urban renewal agency, utility rates. And then part of the process is the board entry, which is just our software entry. We finalize the CIP document, even though the document, the committee, I put the whole document together with all of the committee's input and stuff. The budget office is actually the one who owns that document. And so they finalize that CIP document and actually present that during the public hearing. Projects in the plan have to be at least $50,000. Anything under that is not in the capital improvement plan. And then GIS maps it, and there will be an updated map with our new plan, our 24 to 28 plan, on the city website. There's one there now, and it will be updated with our new plan by April 26th. And then we have our public hearing. So highlights and challenges that we've had this year going through. We've had right now, there's 189 projects that have been programmed at a $439.1 million over 5 years. Some of our big funding is our rate transfers at 139.6 million. The bond that we're very appreciative that got passed in this 5 years, there's 169.5 million programmed. 37.8 million in system development charges, 42.5 million from the Urban Renewal Agency, and 28.4 million in state and federal grants that's been programmed. And then a multitude of other smaller funding sources are also in there. There's 14 developer delivered projects in our plan. There's 5 federal grant applications, and our utility R&R funding is at 12.7 million. And that's what keeps our, we try to always keep in our utility fund with the rate funds. We try to make sure that we keep a steady dollar amount going into our capital plan every year to replace that old infrastructure. The challenges this year are the cost escalation. Estimates are coming in high. We have 534 unfunded issues. And that's not to say that's all we have within the city. We had this new software come in about 3 or 4 years ago. And so each year we keep adding new issues to the software. We didn't just dump all of them that were in the old Excel programs. It would have been just too much. And then we continue to have the challenge of just an aging infrastructure within the city. This is probably one of my favorite parts is the key projects. So just listing some of our projects by category. We have the parks, the McKay School Park, that's a bond project. A lot of playground facility improvements. The Minnow Brown Island parking lots number 2 and 3, that's going to begin work soon. Brown Road Park, Gear Park, the Wallace Marine Park compactor. And then you can see the transportation projects. There's a mix of bond projects within that transportation as well in that category. Our buildings, obviously our Public Works Operations building, should be ready to move in sometime in October. And then the 2 projects that are in the bond, the Civic Center seismic improvements and the Peace Plaza renovation. Urban renewal. Part of that $42 million is the downtown streetscape improvements. And there's about $4 million per year for 11 years. So that's really nice. And then going into our utility, we have the Deer Haven culvert, the McGilchrist culverts, and Mountain View, some stormwater improvements. Water, the Silverton Road, Ewald, some water system R&R projects, We're also going to start looking at a secondary water source. Wastewater, we have a couple pump station improvements, the Downs Tower. And then at Willow Lake, we continue to have a need at Willow Lake, and working on the clarifiers, some hydraulic improvements. And that's about it there. And then always looking at a way to make our process better. And any input that you could provide is always welcome. So we always want to, for our committee meetings, we want it this next year, we want to refine our scoping of those high priority projects. In the last few years, as I'm sure you know, we've had the big water projects due to the algae. Now we have this big bond, but we also have some real large projects in stormwater and in wastewater that we just need to scope them. We need to get down and scope those high priority projects so we can go out and look for identified grants from the build grants from the federal government. We did apply for several grants this year, and we haven't heard back yet if we've gotten any of those, but I'm hopeful. We want to update our project estimates. We want to continue updating our master plans. We're going to take a look at our scoring and our prioritizing criteria and put it to the infrastructure. Parks criteria is well suited to parks, but we want to take a look at the criteria based on wastewater and transportation and the different types of infrastructure. So our criteria is correct, so we can make sure that we're prioritizing our projects better. I have on here add equity to all categories. All projects in parks, transportation, and our utilities have all been scored on equity. So we have done that. And then this next year, we want to add climate action criteria to the categories. We haven't done that.
Tammy, could you just quickly share, how do you define equity, or how do you make that a category? What does that look like for the city?
So for the utility and the transportation, I'm going to have Rob kind of explain the equity for parks, because parks and transportation, it's kind of different. And so I know there's a project right now in the city where we're working to define it better. And so how it is for the transportation and how I did it on utility, one person scores equity. So it's not like, so I don't have all 5 scores scoring equity. It's got to be very factually based. And on parks and transportation and utility, it's based on minority, poverty. What else is there's 7 categories that I looked at. It was English speaking households, disabled over the age of 65, under the age of 18, households with no vehicles. I'm trying to think of what else. That's right off the top of my head. I could send you the criteria that I looked at. I don't want to give you any misinformation, but that's the criteria that I looked at, and
Really helpful.
if it met a certain level.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
2 times the national average or something like that.
Perfect. Thank you.
So that's how we looked at it. So anyway, we want to work on submission to the budget office. Right now you can go on the city website and there's a form, and it's old. So we want to do an automation of that CIP request form. So when citizens go to the city website, it'll be more automated for them. And then always I want to increase the public outreach. We're always looking on ways to do that on the city website, as well as social media, neighborhood meetings. I'm going to plan on being at Public Works Day with some flyers. I think one of the biggest things is we we have the public hearing each year, but we're not good at letting the public know of what's been completed. You know, it's really hard when you can't see it if it's not a park or a nice paved street, if it's in the ground or if it's out at Guerin Island. And trying to get out to the public and the neighborhood associations and to individuals such as you of what's done, you know, what have we completed and where has our money went? So that's something that I'm working on.
Good.
And then that's a general overview of our CIP. And just to let you know that the CIP is going to Budget Committee April 26th. And it should be out. They will be, I'm sure, putting it online before that meeting, the actual document. And like I said, the new plan will be on the city's website by April 26th. And you'll be able to see the whole, the updated plan for fiscal year 24 through 28.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that great presentation. It's really exciting. And I feel like I know personally my knowledge of the CIP process has really grown over the last couple of years. And Rob gave a really good presentation for us earlier. And as we're all thinking once again about going out into the community and sharing this information with neighborhood associations, we're mostly talking about SPIF, but obviously helping them understand CIP. This is really valuable. So I'll open it up to folks on the board with any questions, comments, or thoughts. Yeah,
Al. I would like to know if I could get information on the cost of the park benches, similar to the one that was depicted in the assortment of pictures shown. It's made of recycled plastic. I've seen them placed around there, and I think that there is a growing movement of people who are anxious to be able to contribute money to fund park benches. And I know that one in particular is underway, but besides that one in particular, I think there's a future for others being done. So if I could find out about that, I'd like to promote it.
Okay. I will get that number to you, Al.
Thank you very much.
I guess a quick clarification that I'm just trying to make sure I have right. So the CIP list, I know it's a 5-year list, but it's reevaluated every single year by council, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I like to think of it, it's a plan, and year one goes into the actual budget. So
Got it.
year one is always in the budget, and it's firm, but years 2 through 5 can move, you know, as emergencies come up or other higher priorities come up. We may have to move or push, you know, something that could be set in year 5 may move to year 2 the following year because, you know, maybe it's failing or there's a big safety issue or something. We may have to move something up and push something back out. So that's why it's looked at every year.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Alan Alexander. Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. We talked at our retreat about look at ways we could better serve our community, particularly neighborhood associations, things like that. I would think this would be an opportunity. Unfortunately, there's not much time between this briefing and when the public hearing will be on in June, but there should be a couple of neighborhood association meetings in between, and we need not to get down in the weeds with this, but we can certainly say a little bit about the process and let people know if they do have something of interest, how to start getting involved. It may not be for this year, but at least they can be laying the seeds for other years when it comes to particularly park improvements and CIP. Someone mentioned the cost of park bench. Jennifer Keller knows the cost of everything that goes in a park. And keep in mind that the CIP doesn't address anything less than $50,000. So right. Jennifer may be the best bet.
She would have been my first resource to call.
Okay.
So Alan, I mean, that's a really good point. I think we should be doing more of that. Is there specific information you think we should be asking for from Tammy or others in the city to make sure we can share that out?
Well, she mentioned the fact that the information should be posted sometime after April 26th on the city's webpage. a lot of people in our neighbor associations don't go there. There's so much data you have to mine it to actually get what you want. It might be in our best interest for us to review it ourselves and at upcoming neighbor association, at least give a general overview of the CIP process. And we could look at the year one on what's in it and also address some of where the bond funds are going, but it's also just a mini service to us back to the community using the resources we have to share that with our neighbors and our residents.
Now, just so you guys know too, I do go to the neighborhood associations. So last year, I think I hit almost every one of them and gave the presentation. So what I'm working on for this year is what a lot of them wanted was they wanted the projects that were occurring in their neighborhoods. Yes. And I wasn't able to get that report. I'm now able to do that. So now that we have just finalized the CIP, well, finalized in the sense that it's got to go to budget committee and council first, but I can now put those reports together. And so my next step is to go ahead and put those reports together and submit those to the neighborhood associations and share those with them.
That would be a big help, but I'm just mentioning that it's either have to be in May or the first part of June before the public hearing.
Right. And the information for the April 26th, everything will be posted online prior to April 26th. Yes. I won't have my reports for the neighborhood associations by then because it is a lot of work to put together those individual reports, but they will be getting those.
You're right.
Well.
I certainly appreciate your extra effort in doing that. A lot of folks something happens and the people say they didn't know about it or they didn't know they had an opportunity. And so we're just trying to bridge that gap as we can.
Yes. And that's what I'm hoping for too. So I'm trying to reach out as many places that I can.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Debbie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I agree with Alan. I'm on a neighborhood association board and we just started a newsletter, which the city was pushing for. And I think this would give articles that we can say this is an improvement project that's going on in our neighborhood, and I can give some more background on it and kind of put that into the newsletter. I think it'd be great. And the second thing I wanted to know was about master plans. How are we notified when they're in this year's budget? I mean, how does the Parks SPRAB know when they're coming up?
Rob, would you like to answer that question regarding park master plans?
Yeah, sure. Park master plans are our CIP project. So they're forecasted out in the book and the plan. And they're funded through the city's budget but we don't necessarily start them July each year. And so part of that is by being a member of SPRAB, we develop a work plan once a year, and we have currently with liaison that are assigned to each master plan process. And so that's the best way for this board to be aware of and get involved in the master planning processes that are coming up. Off the top of my head, I can also just quickly tell you what's coming up. We'll be beginning two master plans in the Northgate Neighborhood Association early next fiscal year. That would be Fisher Road Park and Stephen Joshikai School Park. And then next in line after that is another park in the Northgate Neighborhood Association. That's Hazel Green Road Park. So those are the next three in line, and that'll covers us for the next 18 months or so in terms of starts of new master plans.
All right. Any further questions for Tammy? Rick? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, but I'm dealing with a dog here. I'm just really wanted to say, great job. We're finally going to be paving the parking lot at the dog park in Minnow Brown. That has been a source of frustration for many of us for decades. And, it's the most used parking lot in the park. And it just, the potholes were just, we had mini lakes everywhere all the time. So, yeah. So, great. I'm glad to see that. I saw in the headline in the Statesman and got really excited about that. So Oh, good. Finally we get it.
All right, thank you. With that, thank you, Tammy, so much for this presentation tonight. And it does sound like, per Alan's request, if when this is posted on the city website, Rob and Nancy, this might be more of a comment for you. If you all could share that with us as part of, as an FYI, that would be wonderful. So then Debbie can make sure her neighborhood association knows for the newsletter, Alan can be sharing it, etc. That'd be great just for us to know when it is live.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the proposed budget is up next. I'm not sure who is going to be leading that discussion.
It's me, Jennifer.
All right. Hi, Jen.
Hi. Just really quick before I get into that, park benches are approximately $3,500 a piece now. That price has fluctuated over the years. As we all know, costs continue to go up, but that's kind of where we're at right now. For the purchase of the bench, that doesn't include installation cost. So for Al's information, that's the pricing currently. And then as Tammy mentioned,
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. And then, as Tammy mentioned, the CIP budget is going to be discussed with the budget committee on April 26th. However, prior to that, just for information, the first budget meeting is on April 19th. And that's actually when the parks and recreation budgets will be provided right after the city manager his opening statements. So it's the first budget committee meeting is when Parks and Rec, if anyone's interested in knowing that. And then there's two other subsequent budget meetings, one on May 3rd and one on May 10th, dealing with other city departments. But so the two of most interest probably to Parks and Recreation are the 19th and the 26th. So just want to make sure you had that information. And those budget committee meetings typically are from 6 to 8 p.m. In the evening. In looking at the budget, one of the things that came up at the October retreat, SPRAB retreat, is really the timing of when we could start garnering information and input from SPRAB. So previously on the annual work plan, it was really kind of similar to how it is this year, since we were already in the process when we had the retreat, that the information is really shared with SPRAB at the end of the process before it goes to the budget committee. One of the things that we shared at the retreat and discussed was moving that up in the work plan so that we could get information and input from SPRAB more in the fall, end of the calendar year. So there would be opportunity to make some adjustments if we were able to do that, as opposed to just kind of relaying information with SPRAB. So I just want to remind folks that the process moving forward in 23-24 will look a little different with regard to when this information will be shared with SPRAB. So with regard specifically to the budgets themselves for 23-24 is with a couple of exceptions, they're really pretty hold the line budgets. There is no request in the parks budget for additional positions. There was requests, but they were not supported to move forward with those. So the current staffing level is 40 full-time positions with parks, and so that will remain the same moving forward in 23-24. The difference really between the 23-24 budget and our current existing budget really surround just a couple of things. One, right-of-way maintenance has been done in previous years and overseen by parks operations, although the services for that landscape maintenance is paid through gas tax. With the separation of Parks and Recs from Public Works to Community Services, Public Works requested that the right-of-way landscape maintenance stay with Public Works. So that, with the exception of tree care work, in right of ways. The actual other maintenance part of right of way landscaping will stay with Public Works, and Parks will no longer have the responsibility for that. That's currently a contracted service, and Public Works is going to continue utilizing a contractor for that type of work. So that has been removed from our budget in the upcoming year. So that's one difference, and probably the most significant difference. The other issue with Parks and Rec, and I know we've mentioned this before, but just as a reminder, with the new Community Services Department, that the Parks Planning folks, that includes Rob and the new Parks Planner position that was filled, will now be part of Parks and Recreation moving forward, starting in July of 2023, and will not be under Public Works any longer. So those for Parks are kind of the, highlights for that budget. Outside of that, it's pretty much, like I said, a hold the line budget from the current year. Any questions on the Parks budget?
Yeah.
The budget, I should say, I'm sorry, the budget is about $7.8 million for Parks. I apologize. I should have mentioned that.
Alan, I see you have your hand up.
Selfishly, Jennifer, is the money for the SPIF program in the budget proposal?
It is.
Great.
It is.
Thank you.
It will continue on in the same amounts and the same levels, and we're excited about that. So there's been no discussion about removing that. So yeah.
Well, I can honestly say it's not a lot of money compared to the city budget, but it gets a lot of mileage and a lot of impact dollar for dollar at the neighborhood levels.
100%, and it's really well received by the neighborhoods, and sometimes that makes all the difference in their parks by being able to utilize those SPIF grant award dollars. So we're excited that it's continuing as well. The recreation. Oh, sorry,
Jennifer. I just had a couple quick questions. One is, at one point there was conversation, we talked about possibly someone doing like a federal fund grant writer or position. I know other parts of the city have talked about that. Is there any conversation around that anymore?
So I did put that in the budget for a limited duration position. So that can be up to 2 years. The cost for that position is about $128,000 a year. It is pending. It's because it's a new position. Limited duration positions are, in the sense of adding positions to a budget, are considered kind of similar to career positions from a budgeting standpoint. And so it's pending. It's considered a program enhancement since it is an additional position. And so at this point, it has not been approved and potentially would not be approved, but it was requested.
Gotcha.
So just
thank you.
And
then last quick question for you now is, I was thinking about the pavement at Minto Brown that would just come up. And as we think about projects like that, and especially thinking about the climate plan and some of our other goals, do we think about some of the things like permeated pavement? I don't know how, I imagine that's more expensive. Tree wells have come up earlier with conversations with Mylan. All these things add costs to projects, but obviously get us to where we want to go in terms of both our climate and environmental goals. So how much of that is built in and discussed as you get the budget stage?
So we do discuss that. In fact, just last week we had the parking lots are actually a bond project. They're noted in the CIP, but those are actually being done through the bond dollars at Minto. So we actually had a meeting about that last week. And one of the things that we're discussing as we're doing these projects is there other alternative methods that we can incorporate because now is kind of the time to be able to do that. It makes sense if we're going to be replacing and rehabbing some of these areas. So those are part of the discussion points. In some cases, it may be cost prohibitive that we can't do that, but we're at least having the conversation about where we can incorporate those processes. And is there also an opportunity that we can do some test piloting type of things in certain locations before we invest larger sums. If we try some things in a couple of areas and see the success on that, and then see if it makes sense as we move forward, either through the bond, since it's 10 years, or through other funding mechanisms to incorporate that more into the larger plan. So I'm glad you brought that up, but we are considering and discussing all of those types of remedies, I guess.
That's really good to know. And I mean, I don't know how far it goes, but I feel like that's something many of us here probably would be very interested in finding ways of trying to support, whether it's through a letter or something, just to, because I know it's through the bond in that case, but I mean, it seems like, Minto is a natural area and there was a
Right.
for the bond. And so if we could just at least start with a higher level number that includes something more sustainable, like this pavement project that is, I definitely see the benefits of it, but also having the making it as sustainable as possible, knowing this is, a huge habitat and wildlife area would be great. So would love to think about if there's ways that SPRAB can kind of help with that in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions relative to parks?
Al's hand is up.
Oh,
But just reinforcing, I wanted to be sure I understood the reference to permeable pavement. I've seen some examples of that, and I hope that is part of what we're talking about there. So, but it seems also that it would be a money saver in some respects if you did not have to provide drainage, plumbing for runoff water that would be diverted from a hard surface asphalt. If it's permeable, you eliminate all the expense of that kind of drainage stuff, I would think. So maybe it would not be as expensive in the long run as one might think.
Well, I think in discussions with the engineers and so forth, and certainly, planning as well, is, there's not a one-stop approach. A lot of these parks are different. There's different variables that come into play, different circumstances that happen in the place. So in some parks, it may be feasible to do that. And in some parks, it's not feasible to do that for some reason. So, we're just kind of looking at the parks. I mean, there's always a balance, within you have a certain amount of money that you're like, whether it's bond or whether it's other funding streams, you typically have a certain amount of money. You're trying to get as much done as possible with existing pricing that you can. And so, it becomes a factor. And so that's why we're kind of trying to look in the discussions on where it makes sense to do that. Where is it in the best interest to maybe spend some money up front to do some stuff that we may have long-term benefits, as opposed to in other locations, maybe it doesn't make sense to do that.
Appreciate the thought. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. With regard to recreation budget, so the recreation budget is approximately $1.5 million. There is a request in the proposed budget for recreation for one additional FTE, and that position really relates to the Jerry Frank Amphitheater manager. Currently is a limited duration position, and the request in the budget is to make that a permanent career position. So that is added in the recreation budget from 22-23 to 23-24. And aside from that, similarly, the recreation budget is a hold the line kind of budget, no significant changes or differences for the upcoming fiscal year from the current fiscal year. So I know that's kind of a high level overview of the budgets. And as I said, as we move forward in the upcoming 23-24 year, we'll have SPRAB involved earlier in the process. And so there can be more dialogue and more flexibility to get SPRAB's input and perhaps support in requests moving forward. Any questions?
Don't hear any more. I know I asked all of mine, so thank you so much, Jennifer. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, development of outreach materials.
Good evening, everyone. Rob Romanak, Parks and Natural Resources Planning Manager. I want to start by apologizing. I have been very, very busy, and I have no significantly new materials to share with you tonight. I have polished up the slide deck that was presented last month in response to some of the feedback I received at the meeting. Beyond that, I haven't had any time. We've had a number of important grant applications that have been tying up my entire team. So I will be providing my next objective is to develop a fact sheet to assist you all on your outreach. And I will be circulating that before next month's meeting, and you can all send me individually your comments, and then we can hopefully have a more polished product by the time we reconvene in May. Aside from that, Dylan, I would suggest it might be worth some discussion about assignments as you look at deploying that slide deck and getting out and start talking to the folks and giving staff a deadline to get materials ready for you so we can make sure that we prioritize that work appropriately.
A really good point. And I know I missed last time, but I looked through the slides that you shared with me and just really fantastic. So I'm sure everyone else echoed that, but it really does get it exactly what we need. It's short, concise, gets the information clearly, visually appealing. So, and when it comes to the fact sheet, I know I had laid out a bunch of items for it in the past. So if there's anything I can do to help with you on that, let me know. And yes, Debbie.
I didn't see the slide. I wasn't here last month and I don't know where. It probably was sent to me somewhere, but was it sent to us with a packet or?
Let me find the link. Or are you finding it, Rob?
Yes, let me, I can share my screen, but I can also, in the chat, I could send you all a link that you could open on your at home, and after the meeting, you can look at it as well.
Yeah,
that would be good. A link like that, yeah.
So in terms of assignments, that's a really good point. I did see that came up in the minutes last time. So I know in some cases we have at least a couple of us in West Salem, for example, and there are, how many, is it 18 neighborhood associations now? I know there was a one change. I can't remember if it did go 19 to 18 or 18 to 17.
We're currently 17.
To 17, okay. So there's currently 17. There are 8 of us. I don't know. I think David had said that as school board representative, he was not potentially going to be doing the public outreach in that capacity. But so there's 8 to 9 of us, and that means that everyone needs to do at least 2, and then a couple people could do 3 to make up for that. Do people have thoughts? I think one option is everyone could think if there's a few neighborhood associations that you'd be most interested in, and we could email those and kind of do a list. I imagine that there's the neighborhood you live in, but then there might be work you've done with other neighborhood associations or people that you might know. I know that especially in certain parts of the city, there's some that border very closely, and so people might be affiliated with multiple very easily. But let's just open it up to start. Are there for example, I live in West Salem, and so that's one where, Al, I know you've been talking about that, and so perhaps we could go together and work on that. Exactly. But I'd be curious if people have other neighborhood associations they'd be most interested in. Debbie.
well, I'm in Swan on the board there, so I definitely want to talk to Swan. I've also worked with Grant a little bit, and I would be interested in, if nobody else has got Grant, I at least know a couple people there. So.
Great. Rob, I'm trying to just, before we go too far into this, I guess I can take some notes here systematically. What's a good way for us to, if people were to send a couple, you just mentioned you're very busy, so I don't want to just add a ton more on your plate, but is there an easy way to have that information come in to where, I could even just make that into a list before next time we could figure out where there's some gaps and assign people?
So I understand, if the members wanted to individually let staff know, maybe a neighborhood association or 2 that they're interested in presenting at, we could compile a list. Is that the request?
That would be the request, but I'm also acknowledging that I know you're pretty busy. So if you need me to somehow get that information, I'm balancing public meeting laws and your own plate here. So what's a good compromise to make that happen?
What's a good way to get all that information to one place?
Yeah, I would, let's just, for the sake of public meeting laws, please do email me. That's not too terribly difficult thing to do, to compile a list and share that back out with the group. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit to my section update well, first of all, I am not going to be in the office next week, but following my return to the office, we have a new senior park planner beginning with the city. And so that's going to significantly alter our staffing in our group. So that's 50%, that's 100% increase in staffing. So I think things will get better here in the short term.
Great. So that's everyone's assignment, but we can open it up if folks have any neighborhood associations you want to verbally share your connection with right now, like Debbie did. But in between, we want to share those out. So Alan, I saw your hand was up. You're on mute still, Alan. Let's make sure to get you off mute there.
I'm active in Sunny Slope, and I'll be happy to take Sunny Slope in either SWAT or Fayrite,
Perfect.
or both if we need to.
Yeah, I live in Fayrite, so I will take that one, and maybe Sumter so south of Fayrite.
I would like to reach out to the association that is in Northeast, the McKay area. I don't know the name. Northeast Neighbors Association, I think.
I think it's NIN.
McKay Park is located in the Northeast neighborhood. McKay Park is located in the Northeast Lancaster Neighborhood Association, NOLA. The most northeastern neighborhood association in the city is Northgate, and that does include several, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, our next 3 master plans scheduled are all in that neighborhood association. So that would be a really important one for the SCRAB to visit, I believe.
Okay, this is great. So everyone will send maybe your top 3 to Rob, and then we'll put that list together. Next time we come back, we will see where there are some gaps, and then we can assign those out. And I'm happy to fill gaps in that case. So, but everyone else can step in as well. Sound good? Perfect. All right. Let's move into board member updates. I know we've had a lot on the agenda tonight, and we're already at 7:20. So one thing I just wanted to quickly share is we talked about the SPIF grants, and I don't know if you all talked last time that we were able to get some press around this. And so I don't know if everyone saw it, but I was able to work with city staff, and we got we put out a press release about the SPIF grants, and there was a Statesman Journal article, a Salem Reporter article. I'll share the Statesman Journal one here, but I just thought that was a really good opportunity for us to make sure that the city at large is hearing about some of the work parks are doing. And I think that's an opportunity for us as volunteers to be helping out with writing some of this, or just making sure we're sharing the word, whether it is just on social media or with reporters. In this case, the city was able to take a lot of this, but I was able to help get it started. And so if there's anything like this that you all are working on, or as we find out about different projects, you think this should be something we should promote, I'd love for you all to speak up on that so we can make sure everyone knows about the work happening. Any other board member updates? Debbie.
I know it's getting late, but I did want to at least bring up one thing, which was the issue of the gas-powered leaf blowers in the Parks Department. And I had asked about this really briefly in the past, and they said they did not fit the needs of the parks, like the gas-powered, the electric ones didn't fit the needs. But I recently got a letter from the parks from the state Parks Department. And it's the state Capitol Park. They have converted most of their leaf blowers, trimmers, weed eaters, chainsaws, mowers to electric. And he gave some examples, still grade. And then many of the state parks are also moving to electric tools and mowers. And there's a lot of advantages that he outlined to those. So I just feel like technology is changing, and it would be nice to have an update on whether or not, given our climate action plan, we can maybe think about moving more towards electric, especially leaf blowers, but other things as well at some future meeting.
Thank you, Debbie. I support your notion. Appreciate you bringing it up.
Jen, I think that might be a question for you. I know we have the electric street sweeper application in. Is this something we've been looking at as well?
We have looked at it. We have modified from the traditional types of equipment we've used. We've tried battery powered ones. We've tried different options. You know, we have a lot of parks that get lots and lots and lots of use, industrial type of use. So, you know, we have to, again, kind of look at it, and we can certainly, you know, you're right in that technology keeps changing and keeps improving, and we try to review those sporadically to see what we can incorporate. We just have to weigh on that they're going to be able to hold up to the level of use that we use them. And I appreciate that state parks use them. I don't know necessarily the level and how they use them in all of their parks, but we do attempt to keep reviewing different methods to see when we can incorporate it and when it makes sense to do that from both a cost effective standpoint and just an overall use standpoint. Again, that we're not having to continually replace them because they don't last long. And in some regard in the past, that's really been kind of the difficulty is when we've got them and tried them in certain areas, they just don't have the same level of power or the same lifespan. And so we find ourselves continually having to replace them, and that becomes difficult for us.
Yeah, I just want to say, go ahead. Kevin Strandberg, who does the State Capitol Park, was the one who wrote this email, and he was really wanting to show it off and talk about it more. I just don't know if just getting his experience with it, just to inform us of where he's at, what he's learned about how durable they are and how effective they are. I realize the State Capitol Park doesn't probably get the use that Minto Brown or Riverfront Park or anything like that, but
right, that doesn't. But I'm happy if you want to forward that information on to me. We certainly can reach out to him, and we certainly don't negate his input. So we can certainly reach out to him. Again, it just in some cases it's a very different scale on which they're used, and so the benefits may be different for them than it would be for us on a different scale. But we can certainly have a conversation with him about it, see how they're using it, and see if there's opportunities there for us.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Debbie, for bringing that up. Any other board member updates? All right, hearing none, let's move into our information written reports. We'll go through these relatively quickly, but Parks and Natural Resource Planning update. Rob, do folks have any questions about the materials? Or Rob, did you have anything you'd like to share verbally in addition to what you wrote?
Thank you. I have nothing to add tonight, but happy to take any questions.
All right, I'm hearing none. Thank you. I'll just say this was a really in-depth report, and I appreciate how much detail you put into it. I think otherwise I may have had questions, but I feel like you answered all of them, so thank you. All right, urban forestry update. We do not have Mylan tonight, so are there any questions that folks have that you'd like passed along? Hearing none. Okay, parks operations update. Jen, anything you'd like to add verbally or any questions from board members?
I don't have anything to add, but happy if anyone has questions.
Hearing none. Recreation services update. I think the big thing to note there is the fireworks have moved this year. So hopefully, I don't know if everyone saw that announcement, but that's a pretty big one. But Becky, anything?
Yes,
verbally?
it definitely is. Yes. And we're starting to get the word out. So yes, there will be a July 4th fireworks show. We moved it from Riverfront to the fairgrounds, and we're working with them on doing it will be a spectacular event. There'll be carnival rides, food and drinks, plenty of parking. There will also be a concert that to get into the general festival area is free. Of course, the concert, there's tickets related with that, but we're very excited. The other thing that I wanted to let people know really quick, and I know we're going late here, so I think it was mentioned earlier about the plant sale at Bush's Pasture Park there. I wanted to let everybody know I've been in contact with Kathy with the Mission Street Parks Conservancy. There is an awesome 3000 event that is back after COVID, and that is also occurring on Saturday the 29th. So it will be busy, and it's not an oversight conflict. I've been working with both entities, and they know of each other's events, and they actually think it will help both of the events out. And we're working on parking in that Mission Street lot for specific for the plant sale to try to assist them with that. So I just wanted to let you all know that we're working on some parking things on the 29th, but hope you come to Bush Park. It'll be busy and fun.
Thank you.
I would just like to say that the flyer for the recreational activities describing the different kinds of things is very comprehensive, colorful, and engaging. And I've got it, and I will promote it with grandchildren and others. Good job.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Oh, thank you, Rob, for sharing that too about the Eagle Chick. Folks didn't see that in the chat. I just saw that earlier today as well. So that's really exciting. Well, thank you, Becky. I really appreciate those
Yes.
updates and especially letting us know about the plant sale so we can plan accordingly.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, then folks can review the park damage report. Any new business that you would like to raise? All right, well, hearing none, our meeting, we will consider the meeting adjourned. The next meeting will be May 11th, 2023. If everyone could please make sure to send the neighborhood associations of your choosing to Rob, we'll get that list together and we'll come ready to assign some neighborhood associations and go through our outreach materials next time. Thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great